Good morning. It's not morning. This is my drawing studio. There's Beethoven. I wanted to really focus on two topics today. These are the next two chapters. They will be included in our test. The test will be available in 1 week. If you have questions about that, I'll try to answer them in our in-person class tomorrow morning. You are not required to attend that class. That's one reason I'm making this copy available. I'm covering the same material, actually here in a more compact form. I want to talk about photography, and we'll talk about this camera. It's more than 100 years old. Actually, I have another old camera, a simple box. I have this camera as well. This is a 3D camera that literally will record a complete 360 degrees, up, down, sideways. You record everything except the base that's holding it. I think that's pretty cool. And these films are viewed with either like an inexpensive cardboard viewer like this, or still relatively inexpensive viewer such as this. But the last camera we'll speak about is the iPhone. James Bond never had a camera that good. So I'm going to share the screen right now and talk to you for some 20 minutes. Okay, photography. I'm going to really focus on just a few areas. We will talk about digital photography, camera obscura, and daguerreotype. These will be stuff of test questions. I will have a question, and this is one question. When was the first digital image created? It was a little more than 60 years ago, 1957. We're going to go back in time then and look at the camera obscura. The camera obscura means simply dark, obscura, room. And that's primarily what it was. It was a darkened room with a hole that could, in effect, project an image that an artist could trace. Then we'll look at really the first form of photography that's widely available, the daguerreotype. It's named after a person. So I want you to know these two dates. These are the only dates on this test. The first digital image, 57, and then the first really widely available form of photography, 1839. Camera obscura as an ancient history. The ancient Greeks even spoke about optics that allowed for this. It became a useful invention as we really come past the Renaissance. And we have basically the camera. You have a light source, you have a focusing lens, and we have a surface that that image is projected on. But there's really no means to permanently capture that image. That first occurred about 200 years ago. And we have the first permanent photograph, even though it's a pretty clumsy process. This person with this impossible name, Niepce, someone can correct me, please do. He took a pewter plate, put it in a camera obscura, left it there for 8 hours. The plate was covered with bitumen, so basically an asphalt. After 8 hours, he washed off the bitumen that hadn't been baked on by the sun, and it created this first image. As with most inventions, the first is usually sort of a breakthrough. It shows the possibility of what could follow. Less than a decade later, Daguerre, who was friends with the first inventor, took this photograph. And what's fascinating, he put these images with chemicals on a glass plate, and he put them into a cabinet. And he came back, and to his amazement and confusion, the images were fixed. And he tore the cabinet apart and realized that he'd broken a thermometer earlier, and the mercury vapors fixed this image. So we have, as often with so many inventions, we have people who are dedicated and experimenting, but often there's a eureka moment that is unexpected. So with images like this, we have a longer exposure. This is often thought of as the first photograph of a person. It's a person having a shoe shined, and the person who was shining the shoes because he was in motion, maybe it's a she, is not depicted as we'd expect them to be seen. So as time went on, the exposures became less lengthy. The process became more available to people. By the way, this is a self-portrait of Daguerre. And as we come into maybe 80 years later, we have, in fact, the camera that I showed earlier. And this camera, even though it looks, well, it's an antique, we have the viewer. You would look straight down, and you can see sort of what was being photographed. You have a film, and this is film that is wound in the back. And when this film is exposed, I think still at this time, you would ship the entire camera back to be developed. The film would be reloaded and sent back to you. So this is an early Browning, Kodak Brownie camera, and this is sort of the democratization of photography. This is when photography began to leave the hands of these sort of skilled photographers who really dealt with a very dangerous medium. Mercury vapors are deadly. They destroy the nervous system. With this process, at least, we have the beginning of the snapshot. This camera and really all that follow have the same sort of components. We have a lens. I'll go back, there's a lens right here. We have an aperture, and this is adjustable. We have a shutter, and then we have a film, or at least a digital sensor that records the effect of light. That first digital photograph is a slightly different process. Just in our shortened time, I'll speak really only of that it occurred. The digital photography is probably older than we often think of it. Smartphones have jaw-dropping cameras. This camera is less than a 1/4 inch in width. I mean, think how thin a phone is. And within the amazing amount of technology, there is the camera. And the camera, you can see, has many components. It's astonishing that we can take a photograph of a almost infinite width, length, depth, with the means that is so shallow and so tiny. This is sort of an exploded diagram of the series of lenses. I believe that there's 6 lenses at least in this image. Apple employs a staggering number of people, and have worked on this camera for a decade. It'll only get better, and it's pretty astonishing. You can shoot 4K video. 4K is 4 times the resolution of, we think of high definition. High definition is 1920 pixels in width. The last one I mentioned in terms of camera is the virtual reality camera. This camera is surprisingly inexpensive. It's a little more than $300. And I've taken it to a lot of places. Before I take photographs, I try to get out of the range of the picture, so I have to hide around the corner. I went down and took videos of the marching band a few years ago. I've taken pictures in art galleries, and I usually always have explained to the guards that this is not a bomb, it's a camera. And it is sort of jaw-dropping. This is what the image looks like. This is a piano taken really just across the street at the Kofac Recital Hall. And then this image, in effect, is stitched together and viewed. You can literally scroll up without any interference, see top to bottom in 360 degrees. It's extraordinary. There is a seam, and if you look for it, you can see it, but usually it's disguised. Another direction of photography is motion pictures. Motion pictures are just a series of still pictures. They're taken so quickly that our eye is tricked into viewing that we're seeing continuous motion. This is often regarded as the gateway into photography. This is a bet that was made in California between the governor and a wealthy individual. They waged some, I think it was $10,000, princely sum back then. And the wage was, when a horse gallops, is there a point when all four hoofs are off the ground. And the photographer, Edward Whitebridge, put a series of cameras up with, right here, 12 frames, and he ran a string or a thread across the track. And as the horse crossed that, sort of triggered the camera, we have these images. And yes, the bet was decided on a couple images here. But the idea now is here. And within some 20 years, we have film. Early film like this is a science fiction film. It is, people began to really push what film could do. Special effects, sort of imagery of things that sometimes were in front of us and sometimes were from the imagination. What is astonishing is photographs like this. This is a photograph of Pluto. Pluto is far away. When I took astronomy as an undergraduate student, Pluto wasn't even a smudge. It was sort of understood, it was calculated that it existed. So for me to see a particular image of its surface is almost inconceivable. So much of what we experience in the world is from photography. Think about, all the time you spent looking on screens or television screens, computer screens. We're dealing with digital imagery. I guess sort of as a transition to the other part of the class, if you recall, I came to the very first class and took photographs. Then I made some drawings from them. So this is one of the drawings I took from the 180 class when we first met. Thank you for being tolerant of me taking these photographs. This is one taken later that afternoon in another one of my classes. I'm an active artist myself. I do a lot of drawings and painting, digital works, posters, etc. And I will show my work a little bit, in part because I can talk about it. So instead of saying, well, this is what I've read about this artist, I can say, I came to class with the idea of taking these photographs. I want to sort of document the moment, but also really sort of capture the sort of expressions that still come through in these pictures. You know, the eyes really aren't very expressive. The muscles around them can communicate some, with the eyebrows, etc. But it really is the whole of the face that is expressive. And I think that's one of the really distancing things when we're around people wearing masks, or when I'm talking to a class. It's very, I don't know, I feel very much by myself talking talking to you now in a room where no one's here, or even looking out on the students wearing masks. I'm not used to it. I hope we never get used to it. The next chapter, I'm going to speak quickly, and it talks about paint. And paint really has several components. There's a pigment, that's a powdered color. And we'll talk about these different pigments and different mediums in a moment. There's a binder that adheres the paint to the surface, a surface on which the painting occurs. I mean, that can be from a canvas to the side of a building. It can be spray paint, as in graffiti, painted on glass, etc. And then often there's a preliminary coat that allows for that paint to adhere to that surface. Some of the painting media is encaustic, which is a very early form of painting. It's mixed with wax, pigment. It's mixed with wax and resin. And these paintings, as we look at the date on this, is sort of obscured, but this is more than 2,000 years old, this painting. Fresco has to be the most difficult painting media. It's mixing pigment with water and applied to basically plaster. And that plaster is somewhat misleading. In this painting by Raphael, we have sort of a concrete that once it's fixed, that's it. Artists could come back and touch up over the fresco painting, but it is a profoundly difficult medium to work with. This painting is very large. These figures are more than life size. This is in the Vatican, and we'll come back to this painting, but to me what's intriguing about it on many levels is it's in the Vatican, and it's not a Christian painting. This isn't Jesus, this isn't his disciples. We have here Plato and one of his students, Aristotle. And to me was also fascinating who in effect posed for these figures. The person depicted here is Leonardo da Vinci. On the foreground is one of his contemporaries, Michelangelo. And way off to the side, we have the artist included himself in the painting, Raphael. So we have three of the Ninja Turtles, right? Probably the most famous fresco painting is just inside. You walk past that painting into the doorway, and they're in the Sistine Chapel. Sistine Chapel is a private chapel of the Pope. And this painting on the ceiling is sort of football field size. It's more than 200 feet in length. And it was painted by a single person who didn't want to paint it. This is actually the second painting of his life. And he painted on the ceiling. You can imagine how difficult it is. These figures are immense. Adam is some 20 feet in length. And the artist Michelangelo, I think you knew that, hope you did, painted this reluctantly. He sort of messed around for a couple of years, and one day there was a threat of war that if he didn't paint it, the Pope was going to invade Michelangelo's hometown. So Michelangelo finally locked the door, wouldn't let anyone in. He painted on it nonstop. And when he finished, he had an extraordinary achievement. This painting, like I said, is painted without assistance, basically, painted by himself. And in it, he created some of the imagery that still stays with us. So we have that sort of spark of life. What I find interesting in this painting, if we look at the shape, this is the shape of the human brain. Michelangelo, who did attend dissections, many ways is trying to show the bringing of intelligence, the bringing of awareness to humans. Other media, tempera. This is, its durability is created by egg yolk. It doesn't yellow. It's a long-lasting art medium. Probably the painting medium I think we're most associated or we're most familiar with is oil painting. And oil painting dries very slowly. And because of that, the artist can really work and work and work the surface and creating extraordinary detail. This is a 500-600 drill painting. There are different ways to paint. One is with applying these very translucent colors, and that'd be a glaze. So the artist would paint almost in without color, and then layer in these layers and layers of sometimes brilliant color. Another approach was to paint with a very sort of thick paint. This is how Vincent van Gogh painted. Watercolor is basically, well, we can read this here. There's a transparency to it. There's a certain spontaneity. It dries quickly. Increasingly, I think we see acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is perfected in the 50s. If you paint your house, it's probably now with acrylic paints, not oil paints. It is quick drying, has a permanence to it. It's less expensive. There's less preparation to clean it up. You clean it up with water, etc. I primarily paint with acrylic paints. Then we can speak of artists who have used different media mixed in with the painting. So just in this brief summary, what I guess I want you to know that paint is made of a pigment plus a medium and then a binder. And so I'll probably have just two questions then on painting. If we speak of the test, you can see there'll be some questions from these two chapters, more in photography than on painting. But the test will cover a few ideas from the second chapter. And I had, if you recall, 4 terms: representational, abstract, stylized, and non-representational art. These can be found if you go to the first page of Western Online. You scroll past the announcements. Do pay attention to the announcements. I'm going to keep those up at a minimum once a week. If you scroll down past them, you'll find content, and I will have this material included in that. I'll also make this video available in announcements. So we have this information, know these terms. Basically, representational art is when an artist paints what they see. Non-representational art is really not based on observation. It's patterning, or it's mark making of some sort. Much of the like architectural forms are non-representational. Abstract art is sort of a bridge between these, where the artist has changed what they saw. And they've changed it for different reasons. And stylized art is art that's recognizable as like Egyptian style or medieval art, etc. Then the last part from chapter 2 that I want you to be aware of is the 3 terms. They will definitely be on the test: subject, form, and content. Subject is in an artwork the object, representational or abstract art. Form is the organization, visual organization of that work, and that's what the next 2 chapters are about, elements and principles of design. And then finally, content is the impact, what that work says to you, how you respond to it. You know, if you're more educated or if you know more about that artist, it will probably be more meaningful to you. But regardless, you walk by a post and you take a glance at it, that's the content. That's how you respond to it. And the subsequent chapters, do take a look at those, and I did cover those briefly in last week's lecture. If you, what I've emphasized in that will be what's emphasized in the test. So there'll be questions about the different elements, there'll be questions about principles, but we'll have a lot of questions about color, creating the illusion of depth. I'm going to show pictures in the test and then say, this is an example of. So as you take the exam, don't panic. I've said this and I mean it. If you've studied, you should do well. If the test isn't what you expect, we'll work out some solution, okay? So stay with me. We'll try to make this class meaningful. So let's see if I can figure out, well, I don't know if I can get back to me or not. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm going to be in class tomorrow morning. Come to the class, but it's not required. I know some of you have apprehensions, and they're very warranted. I think in many ways that's a smart response. So you don't have to come to the class. This is the material that I will talk about. So if you have questions, email them. Email the questions to me, and I guess my next time I'll speak at you will be in 2 weeks. Thank you much.